All right. Hello. This will be the Constructive. So, here we go. We negate the resolution resolved. The United States federal government should forgive all federal student loan debt. Contention 1 is that student loan forgiveness revitalizes inflation in 3 ways. Subpoint A is the first way, which is by expanding the federal deficit. CRFB in 22 writes that canceling all federal student debt would cost $1.6 trillion. These costs would immediately reduce the value of government asset holdings. And this directly increases inflation from past 22. The full $1.7 trillion price would increase inflation rate by up to 0.5 percentage points. And subpoint B is the second way, which is by increasing expectations of inflation. Chang et al. 22. Households believe the expansionary effects of government spending lead to an upward revision of inflation expectations. These effects are significant and economically sizable, involving upward revisions of inflation expectations by several percentage points. And increased expectations of inflation cause an increase in actual inflation, from Lee et al. In 20. Actual inflation depends on what we expect it to be. If everyone expects prices to rise, businesses will want to raise prices, and workers will want raises. If inflation expectations rise by 1 percentage point, actual inflation will rise by 1 percentage point. And subpoint C is the third way, which is by increasing consumer spending. CRFB 22. Full debt cancellation would increase household consumption by up to $95 billion. The economy is unable to meet existing demand in light of supply constraints. Further increasing demand results in higher prices. Cancellation of all student debt would boost personal consumption expenditure inflation by up to 0.5 percentage points in the year after. Even if only 1/3 of new consumption feeds into prices and the Fed responds with further tightening, debt cancellation would increase inflation. And subpoint D is that inflation makes poverty more common and more severe. Castro 18. The ones who are mostly affected by inflation are the lower class. The poor do not have such resources to counteract the inflation in their income. As the cost of goods and services increases, the poor will have less purchasing power and their standard of living will decrease. Inflation is the net transfer of income from the lower class to the upper class, and the lower class ends up paying more for using credit. And Fremstad 19 quantifies that new research adjusted for income-specific inflation estimates using the inflation rate plus an additional 0.44 percentage points estimate that 3.8 million more people would be counted as poor and that the poverty rate would be 1 percentage point higher. So this means that a 1 percentage point increase in inflation would likely result in roughly 8.6 million more people living in poverty. Finally, subpoint E is that inflation in the U.S. also contributes to global poverty by requiring the Fed to raise interest rates. Marte 22. The Fed Atlanta president doesn't think that policymakers need to raise interest rates any further to bring inflation back to their 2% goal, but an unexpected change in the economic outlook could require officials to lift rates higher. And this is because U.S. interest rates slow down economies internationally. Wiseman 22 explains, the U.S. rate hikes deliver long-distance damage. As rates rise in the U.S., global investors pull money out of poor and middle-income countries and invest it in the United States. It slows growth, wipes out jobs, and squeezes business borrowers. And this causes a reduction in global GDP. Navarro 18. The foreign spillovers of higher U.S. interest rates are large. A rise in U.S. rates of 1% reduces GDP in advanced economies and in emerging economies by 0.5 and 0.8%. And this reduction in GDP would put millions of people in poverty across the world. Moyer 23. GDP reduction from 0.2 to 0.6% represents a significant reduction in overall cumulative economic activity, estimated at $1.1 to $6.9 trillion. The projected number of people pushed into extreme poverty ranges from an additional 18 to 30 million. Thus, we negate.